Well, good evening, folks. I'd like to welcome you here to our committee meeting as well as council meeting. And we're going to be following the two agendas that we have before us. Once again, our committee of the whole and our council meeting. We will start off with a prayer from Councillor Elliott, and that will be followed by the national anthem led by Mr. Joe Longfellow. Councillor Elliott.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for today. We're just blessed to have been charged with the running of this municipality by those who live in it. And Lord, we take that charge seriously. So let us discuss the operation of the city tonight, always bearing in mind to be open, to be mindful of others, respectful of the decisions that are made here tonight, and always keeping an eye towards those that we represent, make decisions in their best interest. Lord, we just ask your presence here this evening. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons command. Car ton bras se porte l'épée, il se porte la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée de plus brillant exploit. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, Joe. Well done as always.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as per usual, my pleasure, as always.
Thanks, Joel. Members of council, I'm going to ask the clerk if she has any addendum items. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. None this evening.
Thank you. Members of council, I need a motion to confirm the agenda, please. Councillor Demery, Councillor Bodner, any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Are there any disclosures of interest this evening? No disclosures. With that, we'll move on to items requiring a separate discussion. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 1 and 29.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further items? Members? With none, if I can have a motion to receive and accept the remainder of the items on the agenda. Councillor Steele. Councillor Doucette. Are there any questions or comments? With none, all those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. We do have one delegation this evening, as one has decided not to come. I understand, Councillor Demery, you want to speak on that on his behalf, so I'll get to you. Best to deal with that during Councillor's items. Be perfect. Okay, good. Thank you, Councillor. If I can call upon Mr. Albert Zappatelli. Albert's going to speak to us about the umbrella energy regarding alternative energy, roof solar panels, financing of renewable energy, local improvement charge available for residential use. Members of council, you do have the presentation on page number 7 of your agenda. Mr. Zappatelli, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Welcome to South Niagara.
Thank you so much.
Albert, if you want to just push a button, you're
there we go. Do I get a half hour since the other guy's not here? I'm just kidding. No, I'll be quick. I'll be quick. My name is Albert Zappatelli. I own a company called Umbrella Energy. I have a highly trained staff, probably the best in Ontario of one from Niagara College. And we don't do installs, we distribute, we broker through Canada. My staff's job is to sell and work on microfits and fits. My job is the future. I do not firmly believe in fit program or microfit. It did open the way for what we're doing in the future of what I call net metering. My house is net metered when the sun shines. My meter goes backwards. When the sun goes down, it goes forward. At the end of the year, I have a zero balance to my hydro. I do that at home. I do that at Umbrella Energy. I also have a restaurant in Niagara Falls, and I net meter there. With no government subsidization whatsoever, I did this, knowing that when I installed, I was at a 14-year payback window based on what I was paying out of my pocket. Now, my first job I ever installed was $9 a watt. Now we're doing it for $2.50 a watt. So this net metering is becoming more favorable for the future. And again, I'm not selling you panels today. I'm trying to get you involved in the future. I found Port Colborne to be the right size, the right attitude with council, and the right demographic for everything for it. So now this microfit and feed-in tariff, what the government's paying the people, after you pay income taxes, insurance, and everything on it, it's really not a good deal. I hired another college and paid them handsomely to do a third-party study on where their energy cost is going to go, where the prices of panels are going to go, and if a person were to pay a loan instead of their utility, how long would it take to pay off? They came up with a true number of 10 years. We will always need the grid. We always need the grid, okay? And on the best of days, solar might see 1%. If it saw more than 1%, and I was concerned about hydro, me as a net metered person, I would pay hydro to store my energy. Well, I wouldn't pay them 22 cents a kilowatt hour when it hits there in 10 years, but I would happily pay 5 cents a kilowatt hour so they can maintain the grid, maintain their good staff. The problem with doing a net metering system for an individual is you might need a car and have to borrow money for that. Your son or daughter might have to go to college, borrow money for that. You have to keep your credit alive. You can't spend $25,000 on a system that's going to pay back in 10 years. By the way, after 10 years, 15 years free hydro guaranteed. So Minister Wynne, before she moved up to office, she amended the Local Improvement Charges Act, where a city can take financing from the Federation of Municipalities, in turn loan it to an individual that wants to do a solar project or any energy efficient project. The best part of this program is it's tailor-made by you. It's not handed down to you in stone. If you don't like wind, or if you don't like this or that, you don't put it as part of your offer to your residents. And then that money is paid back by the residents through a tax levy with a maximum of 10 years. The 10-year window is just right for what it would cost to do a system. The average house that I know, forget about reading the internet, what I've studied on a lot, uses 10,000 kilowatt hours a year. 1 watt of solar in Port Colborne makes 1 kilowatt hour. If you use 10,000 kilowatt hours, you need 10,000 watts of solar. Our goal is to have it installed for $2.50 a watt, $25,000, to maintain that 10-year buyback window without affecting a person's budget. And again, I say, instead of paying utility, you pay your local improvement charge back. It is a true good program, I feel. Like I say, they paid way too much for microfit. They paid way too much for fit. That money could have been spread out so much further. On a silver lining, it brought us some manufacturing jobs. It brought us more knowledge, and it put us where we're at today. Right now, we are selling a lot of net metering jobs. Larger buildings with bad power factor are paying towards 22 cents a kilowatt hour now because of their dirty power. We're softening that load for them right now. On the screen, Premier Wynne approved change to the Municipal Act and City of Toronto Act to empower all municipalities in Ontario to take the lead on energy and water conservation programs. Municipalities can now use a financing tool called Local Improvement Charge to help property owners finance changes to their homes that are aimed at reducing energy or water consumption. And this comes here, upgrade to high efficiency furnaces, solar panels, air conditioner, water heaters. You can tailor make your program. The best thing about putting 10,000 watts of solar on your roof is that when it's paid in 10 years and you go to sell your house, what's your house worth? You got no hydro bill. You're going to get your initial investment back. Another large thing we're working on with Umbrella is, again, I'm not a big fan of panels bent all over roofs. We try to work with cooperatives. If the city would implement a charge like this, we would like to work with you to say, are there some brownfields that you have? Can we put the panels over here? And the people, your house doesn't have to be attached to that panel. It could be 10 miles from your house, those panels, but you own them. So what we call a solar park under a renewable energy cooperative, where someone wants panels for their house, they pay $25,000, but they go to the park. they get credit for those panels. A renewable energy cooperative is regionally driven. The cooperative can't leave the region. Two totally separate programs. Right now, I'd like to push for the local improvement charge. I would like to ask if the council could respectfully ask city staff to do a report and see if it's a headache for you or not to do. Will the people jump on it? That's my future. That's our future in the alternative energy. This is where we come. That's where we come into play. If it is there at a 3%, 3.5% interest, it's feasible to do. We don't need. I'm going to say this to you. If you sign for a net metering contract right, microfit contract right now, the government will give you $100,000 over 20 years. Why don't you just finance $25,000 over 10? The savings is exponential to our governments. And I have the greatest respect for utilities, believe me. Without them, we can't do this. We'd be on batteries. So like I say, in the future, if it gets popular, we have to look at a different way of doing it. We have to pay the utilities as a battery so they can maintain this. At the end of my presentation here, I'll email everybody, is the work that Niagara College did. Oops, sorry. There we go. I know what I'm doing here. This is the work that Niagara College did. I'm not allowed to touch these numbers. This is their, they worked with Ontario Power Authority to see where the hydro rate is going to go in 10 years. And they worked with how much the investment is and what the payback is. If I were to change the number, I have to go through Niagara College to change any numbers on this. So it's a third party that does it for me. Are there any questions here at all from anybody? Could be a real quick night at council night. Sorry? Keep going. Keep going? That's it. I'd like to request that the city council look into the local improvement charge. You have Umbrella Energies, my staff, myself, for free to assist you to build it. And if we do it, we're one of the first cities in Ontario to follow through with it.
Great.
And that's it.
Thank you, Albert.
Okay, you're welcome.
Members of council, are there any questions or comments? Councillor Bodner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter, I guess, and maybe just a statement to staff too. If council does direct staff to look at this, I guess I'm a little skeptical when I see things like no additional cost to local governments. I get the fact that we already have a billing system. That's great, and I get the whole, you know, I buy into the panels and the goodness that it can do. I'm just wondering that when staff, if they do come back with a report, they're going to need to tell us if they can handle it with the existing people we have, because I can't believe there isn't a cost. I know that there is going to be a cost of some kind, I'm sure. Unless we got people sitting around doing nothing, which then we should know because we're in the budget, but I don't think that's the case either. And I guess the other question is to the presenter, 10-year payback on the equipment, I guess, or your hydro bill. How long does the equipment last? I'm a novice at this for length of time, so, you know, is it worthless after 10 years? It'll last 100 or what?
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Zapatelli?
The first thing we looked at was that, yes, there's extra costs. And when I said out loud 3.5% interest, that would be under a model of you getting it from the Federation of Municipalities at 2 and charging 3.5. So 1.5% fee for your services. Yes, you are correct. It's going to take, I hope it takes a lot of time. That means it's working, okay? Number 2 is all solar panels, if purchased properly, and we do, purchase Ontario, have a 25-year warranty on them. 25 years, they guarantee not to go down under 80%, they lose 20% of degradation. That's done by the Lloyd's of London insurance policy. Every panel that's made in Ontario has to pay into that premium. Once this is installed, like I say, if we can have a 10-year buyback with no budget change for an individual, then you got 15 free years of hydro. Okay? Are there going to be maintenance issues? Of course there is. Of course there is. But they're not astronomical whatsoever. I think insurance is your most important one, I have a very large system, does 80 homes. My insurance is $1,000 a year. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Counselor? That's fine.
Yeah.
Further questions, comments, members? With none? Counselor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the presenter. Every home that installs these has to feed in to the grid.
Yeah.
Is there a capacity limit through hydro right now?
When you do net metering, and it's a great question, thank you. When you do net metering, you're allowed up to 10,000 watts, which is the average house I find. The government might tell you it's 6,000 kilowatt hours a year. I find 10, no matter where I go. Okay, we read through our studies. As long as you're below 10, they see an EV change. And legally, we can go up to 10 with just a simple letter to Ontario Power Authority and your local utility. Anything over 10, so if we went in a park idea, then we would have to pay for an assessment fee. So if I wanted to put 300,000 watts to do 30 homes in a park, we would have to hire your utility company to do an assessment, probably a cost about $15,000. And they would say, why don't you put it over here, because we have the line capability over here, we need it over here. We don't have it over there. So like I say, we're there to work with your utility. We're not, by any means, a competition to them.
Thank you for that, because I was trying to figure out, you know,
Yeah, of course.
everybody,
Of
if
course.
everybody did it and it was
We'd be in
wildly
trouble.
successful.
Yeah.
Which leads me to the next question to Peter. If this came to fruition, and you had a huge buy-in by several homes, does this go against our borrowing capacity and our debt repayment? Do they use it as that, or is this a completely separate loan from FCM?
Mr. Sinez?
If we have long-term debt, then it does go on to our debt capacity, whether it's from the region or from FCM, unless they have, on the changes that they've made in the Act, unless they've made some particular regulation in there that it doesn't, but it's something that we'd have to look into. But in most cases, any of our debt goes against our debt capacity.
Unless, of course, it was done through one of the corporations that we control.
If it was outside of the municipality,
Energy.
yes.
Okay. Further questions or comments? Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter, I just wondered if you could tell me a little bit about your company and how long you've been in business.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Zepp.
Umbrella Energy was formed in at the end of 2010. We sole proprietorship beginning of 2011. To be honest with you, I use it as a side business. I love science, and we did some pretty spectacular sales in 12 and 13, and then in May we purchased an acre of property on the Queen Elizabeth Way. We hired a staff. We went crazy marketing. We got distribution contracts for Canada, and I wish I was back in my garage right now. Everything's good. My staff is great. We have a great reputation of. Once we give a price, we give a price. That's it. It doesn't change. If something breaks, we're there for you. We've learned so much that you just don't buy outside of Ontario. They've changed the law now where we can use any panel from anywhere in the world. If a customer wants to save 35 cents a watt, call the other guy. We'll make sure if something breaks and it's made in Ontario, we can snap it off the roof and bring it to the manufacturer. If something snaps and the company's in Korea or China, it doesn't work for us. That's our history in our company there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? That's fine. Any further questions or comments, members? With none, Mr. Zapatelli, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the great attitude. That is a spectacular sign in the back, by the way.
Which one?
No, it's not the house. No house. I took a picture, I put it on Facebook.
Thank you. Where did that come from? I wonder. Members of council, any direction that you want to take on this presentation besides, well, I'd like to see a motion to receive the presentation. Councillor Desmarais?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, I was going to actually make a motion to ask staff to prepare a report
Okay, so receive the presentation and request that staff come back with a report, working with Mr. Zapatelli?
Yes.
Okay, and others that may be interested as well? Okay, Mr. Heil?
Your worship, we will need some time, and I think if it's possible, can we refer it to budget? Right now, I know that it's not going to happen in a week. I know, your worship, it's going to take some time. And probably someone with some know-how in this field, so we may request some funds to do this.
But what I would suggest we do is possibly even refer to the Hydro Board. And we can get some help or some resources from the Hydro Board. It's food for thought, so. Members of council, I'm going to need a second to that motion. Councillor Bodnar? Question, Councillor Bodnar, go ahead.
No matter where we refer it to, I guess I would assume councilors, if they have questions, can submit those questions to staff wherever it be. Because I'm sure once we have a chance to digest it and think about it, there might be some concerns that, you know, that we want answered before the report comes so that we don't have to ask them and then they have to go back. So, and I wouldn't mind getting the fire chief's comments in the report too on something, because I know roof panels to some extent are, you know, I've heard different things. I don't know whether it's right or not, but if we could just get a comment at the time the report comes back on that.
Okay, so we have a motion moved by Councillor Desmarais, seconded by Councillor Bodnar, that this would be referred back to staff for report, back to council, as well as receiving the presentation. Any further questions or comments on the recommendation? Councillor Bodnar?
Where are we referring it?
Staff.
Staff?
Yeah.
Not Hydro?
No,
Staff, okay.
that's the motion. Members of council, any further comments or questions? With none, all those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Desmarais. Thank you, Councillor Bodnar. Members of council, we now, we had Mr. Rosnuck, who was going to be presenting to us, but I understand that at least two councillors are going to pass on his message to members of council. Once again, I believe it's Councillor Desmarais as well as Councillor Butters. If we can take that under new council items and new business, that would be great. That's fine. Okay. We're going to move on to my report now. As members of council may recognize, there was a very important announcement today made by the Honourable Deb Matthews, the Minister of Health and Long-Term Care. Mr. Matthews did today announce that the Niagara Health System will receive $26.2 million in planning grant money as the next important step toward a new South Niagara hospital. The minister also announced that Niagara's community-based board of directors for the Niagara Health System has now taken on its full responsibilities. The board has also recommended that Dr. Kevin Smith continue in a leadership capacity to finish the job that he started, and the Niagara Health System has in fact entered into a management services agreement with St. Joseph's Health System, keeping Dr. Smith on as CEO of the Niagara Health System. I have to say, having remained relatively silent on the issue of a new South Niagara hospital, I now feel compelled with you members of council as well as members of the public, to point out some issues that have somewhat been accruing over the past few months in the back of my mind in regards to servicing the citizens of South Niagara and maintaining the service level that is appropriate and quite frankly expected with a compatible and available service level that we expect here for the citizens of South Niagara, but also compatible with available services at the new site in the city of St. Catharines with the new hospital located there. And for the most part, members of council, I would only expect that these issues will be addressed within the $26.2 million planning process. Members of council, you've all read the report that Dr. Smith authored, and on page 10 of that report, to the Honourable Deb Matthews, this report, of course, entitled The Restructuring of the Niagara Health System, he states that he recommends a new facility in the QEW and Lions Creek area of Niagara. We know that the mayor of the city of Niagara Falls has taken it upon himself to arbitrarily choose that site and erect a sign that, quite frankly, is a 10 to 15-minute drive from the new St. Catharines site. Dr. Smith goes on to say that 2 additional freestanding UCCs, urgent care centers, would be determined and can be supported. However, members of council, I have seen nothing, I'm sure you have seen nothing as well, from the Niagara Health System or the LHIN requesting a capital funding request for this, and nothing from the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care or Dr. Smith regarding this, which is the siting of the 2 UCCs. And as noted by Dr. Smith in his report, and I quote, "I cannot stress enough that the Southern mayors are unanimous in their support of a South Niagara hospital being built." May I be clear? And I've tried to be clear with Dr. Smith and many others that have been involved in this process, and once again, I'll repeat myself and be clear here this evening, that Regional Chair Burrows and all the Southern mayors were unanimous and only in agreement in principle of this new hospital plan with the assurance that our UCC needs would be met as per our recommendation. Once again, I'll quote, the recommendation was very clear. 2 geographical areas being described as the QEW and Lions Creek area and East Main Street and Highway 140 areas be considered as shortlisted locations for the proposed development of a South Niagara Hospital complex. Conditional, and this is the critical part that's been ignored conveniently over the course of the last year, conditional that the urgent care centers continue to operate in Port Colborne and Foote. Now, members of council, I remain, as you know, committed, and I'm sure you do as well, and are committed to that assurance. And I'm requesting further, and this is the key part now moving forward, requesting further clinical site plan analysis of this component of the continuum of care. Very important. Transition plans of care with the existing UCCs are simply not enough to move forward with capital funding plans. We can't just get half the story. We can't talk about moving forward to constructing a new hospital without a plan of continuum of care, a site analysis in terms of the site plan analysis, as well as the use of 2 UCCs within the overall planning. We just simply can't go halfway. We have to go the full way. And we are expecting to be a part of those explorations moving forward of innovative models of care. We support the expansion, for example, of the paramedic programming, and support the expansion of enhanced models of primary care. We are simply requesting this component of the recommendation be addressed with a clear rationale for prompt care in South Niagara. And once again, expect this to be a part of the $26 million planning process. Today's announcement, members of council, also deserves a response of insistence based on the effect of consolidation of inpatient beds, outpatient clinics, and regional programs. Simply put, what we are dealing with today. We are strong supporters of best practice standards being developed and implemented, from infection control to staffing with local and best human resource allocation, to EMS, to appropriate distance to travel for care. And these are all important aspects to consider. However, we do need today to look at our primary care funding, and it needs to be addressed immediately. We will rely even more on our providers, our healthcare providers, being able to look after their patients post-discharge, once they leave the hospital, being able to develop better care management, and all of this will require far greater funding to some of the primary care models that are currently in the smaller rural communities. We must implore that the ministry fund better diagnostics and lab services at the primary care level. This is not happening right now. That's what we're dealing with today. We need to provide mid-level care provision and after-hours urgent care in a model that retains our physicians in our small rural areas, such as the city of Port Colborne. We need to ensure that our ambulatory care needs of our demographic are being met, and we will ensure that these benchmarks are being met at the local, the LHIN, and the provincial levels. In order to retain, and I don't have to tell you this because you've already known this, you guys have been dealing with this for the better part of the last decade and a half. In order to retain and attract business, as well as lifestyle, we have to ensure best practice care. B, how many times have we heard that in the last 10 years? From all medical professionals. Best practice care. And that is delivered right here in our own communities. We have been working diligently to offer new clinics, new and innovative ways to bring specialty care here into the city of Port Colborne and the surrounding areas. We haven't been parochial. We've been working with South Niagara communities as well as North Niagara communities to ensure that those partnerships are in place for both specialty care as well as those primary care services that we only expect here in our part of the world. Our medical professionals, by the way, and I have to say this, and being involved as much as you are and others on different committees, different healthcare committees, our medical professionals within our community and the surrounding areas throughout South Niagara deserve a great deal of credit. A great deal of credit, as they have not only educated us, but also have worked with us to ensure that the proper planning is in place. And they deserve probably the most credit. The medical professionals, Joanne Ferriccioli, a member of staff, we've been on a constant healthcare lesson for the past decade, but as well enabling us to put proper planning in place. Now is my expectation, and I look forward to being a part of the planning process that the minister announced today, to inject into that process what we've already developed here in Port Colborne and the southern Niagara areas, our surrounding areas, as well as developing local patient care experience questions to ensure that our citizens' voices are heard as well, and that their needs would then be expected to be met. Once again, I expect the work that has already been established to be taken into consideration throughout the $26.2 million planning process, as well as a response to local patient care experiences. We need to hear from them. And finally, members of council, establishing proper locations for any capital investments that are based on clinical site plan analysis and that takes into consideration a continuum of care and therefore is established in the best interests of all South Niagara residents. So there's your announcement today at 3 o'clock in Niagara Falls. The takeaways are now a planning process that we hope and expect that will include a lot of what we've already accrued over time. But secondly, and most importantly, a process that we would expect before any capital investments are made will be based on clinical site plan analysis that takes into consideration a continuum of care based on best practices. Any questions? Comments? It's a lot to digest, I know, but I know members of council, a lot of you, if not most, if not all of you, have been involved in this process from day one. The optimism here is that we can inject a lot of what we've brought together, and as well, hopefully, before any decisions are made in terms of capital investments, that it will in fact be based on clinical site plan analysis. And that is what I think our patients, our residents expect. So with that, I have Councillor Butters and Councillor Bodner. Councillor Butters?
Yeah, I just have a question or two, perhaps. So for this $26.2 million planning process, do you know how that's going to roll out? Do you know like what kind of the timing of it is, or is it going to be driven by the LIN through the Niagara Health System or by the province, Ministry of Health? Like, do you know kind of the inner workings of how that will work?
It's a great question, Councillor. It's the same question I had.
Oh.
And waiting for the answer. However, having said that,
Okay.
what I do know now, based on the announcement that was made today, is that the minister has granted this money to the Niagara Health System. The Niagara Health System new board of directors is now functioning as of
Right.
today. Dr. Smith has now stepped aside as a supervisor and has now entered into an agreement, management agreement with St. Joe's Health Sciences System. Dr. Smith has agreed to now step in as an interim CEO. And of course, with that, the board will now take on its role as a board of directors. And I would only assume by this announcement will be the steward of this planning process. The particulars of it haven't been brought to our attention yet.
Okay,
Okay?
okay, thank you.
And by the way, when it does, I'll be sure to bring it to council's attention. Councillor Bodnar?
So first of all, Mr. Mayor, I just wondered, are you taking deep breathing exercises or meditation or anything like that? Because you seem extremely calm for this announcement. I was, you know, anyways. Maybe you already vented earlier, but, so what's next steps? How do we ensure that we get involved? Do we go through a representative on the new board of Niagara Health System to ask for that? Todd Schultz is on that board, I believe, and, you know, like, what's the next steps?
Well, our next...
I know you're not going to sit around and wait for them
No,
to come.
no. Our next steps are thank you, Councillor, great question. Our next steps are threefold. One is to meet the South Niagara group, because it's not just having to do with Port Colborne, it has to do with all of South Niagara, and of course our partners. And that is, as Councillor Butters has alluded to, is to find out exactly what the process is going to be. And to some extent respect that process, but as well expect that while we respect the process, that the work that has been done by us and many other communities in South Niagara would be brought into their considerations with respect to recommendations that the minister, I'm sure, is going to wait for. And the last part of that is to work together toward that end, is to ensure that, you know, yes, okay, the past is the past, and we want to get by that now. And you know, although a lot of us that drive down Montrose see a big sign that says the future home of the new hospital, we want to ensure that the future home of the new hospital realistically is based on that site plan analysis, is based on best practices, and I'm expecting that this process will drive then that location. Now, when I say that location, I don't mean that particular location, I mean the location, the true location of a new South Niagara hospital. And that brings me to that last point, is that would be our expectation, is that we all work together to that end. To one, ensure that any capital funding investments, whether it be the hospital or the new UCCs, the new urgent care centers, those locations would be chosen based on the process of site plan analysis, best practices, and of course the clinical plans that we put in place. That would drive the agenda, not politics. Okay? Councillor Kenny, and then Councillor Elliott.
Just one question, Your Worship. Since we're going back to the planning stages, they're offering 26.2 million to go back to the planning stage. Are we starting from scratch again? Because you know, they've got the sign up, like you said, but if they're really in the planning stage, then the site shouldn't already be chosen because we're planning it. So if you could answer that would be great.
Well, that's the expectation, and actually it was a comment that I made earlier to someone in the back room, was you would think that you're back to square one with respect to looking at those areas that were considered by the mayors. It's hard for me to answer because the question would be posed to the Niagara Health System. But the expectation is, as I said in my report, the expectation would be that any capital investments, any capital new builds, whether it be a new hospital or a new two new freestanding UCCs, would be based on site plan, clinical site plan analysis. You know, every recommendation with respect to any investments that are made, no different than the process that we had just earlier with the new op center, no different than the Valley Center, no different than other investments that we make, would have to have some substance to it. And the substance to a healthcare facility would obviously be a clinical site plan analysis based on best practices and based on a continuum of care. How these places are going to work together, not only in South Niagara, but throughout the entire region. So, you know, going back to your question, that would be our expectation, that before a site is chosen, that this planning process would flush out that information, and the decision would not be based on politics, would not be based on an election around the corner, but would be based on proper planning. Unfortunately, the first site that was built in Niagara didn't have that process attached to it, but let's hope this one does, so that way it can be located in the proper location. But what's most important is not my opinion, not your opinion. It's the opinion of the planning process with respect to a clinical site plan analysis, while at the same time listening to the opinions of the people we service, which are the patients, which are the residents of South Niagara, if not all of Niagara. Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess that's always been a concern of mine. The site of a hospital in South Niagara is a great concern, but nobody's ever really talked about the two UCCs. If we're not going to have a hospital at the top of the 140, where do the two UCCs go? That always gets, yeah, we're going to build a hospital and then we'll just throw in the two UCCs, but where are they going to be? That, I think, is one of the greater questions than the hospital itself, because everybody's going to have a little bit of a drive to get to the new hospital. Even the people in Niagara Falls are still going to have a drive. If you live in the northeast part of the falls and north end, you're still going to have to drive to it. There's going to be cumbersome for just about everybody. What are you going to do with the UCCs? Nobody ever seems to speak to that. I'd like to know, where are the site plans for those? Why doesn't somebody talk about them? And conveniently or not, on my way home today, believe it or don't, Niagara Falls sign at the corner of Lions Creek Road and Montrose is covered up.
Yeah,
I don't know if we're having a new unveiling of the new home of the new South Niagara Hospital. But I didn't hear about the announcement till after I got home, and I saw the sign, and it's like, ooh, they must be protecting it from the weather. And then I hear this, and it's like, so we're going to have a second unveiling of the new home of the new South Niagara Hospital. So it's something, if we can get together on the site of the hospital, where are we doing with the UCCs? So I'd really, and you had to throw that comment out. I'd hate to see the next announcement out of the Premier's office that says, oh, and by the way, the by-election is coming in Niagara Falls, and we just kind of threw you the $26.2 million to start the process to build your hospital, and by the way, we're going to have an election too, so don't forget what we just gave you.
The only reason they're doing it, David, you know that.
Well, two responses to that, Dave, and you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, and hence my comments earlier with respect to the two UCCs. At the end of the day, the recommendation that the mayor's made was very clear, and that recommendation being that we did choose two geographical areas, both of which, one's the QEW in Montrose, and one's the one at East Main and 140. But they were conditional upon the urgent care centers continuing to operate in both Port and Fort. Having said that, is it in the existing facilities or not? And I think for the most part, Dr. Smith has been very clear that it wouldn't be in the existing facilities. Let's face it, the existing facilities in Port and Fort are quite aged. And it would be an advantage to have two new urgent care centers freestanding built. Having said that, we can't let politics get in the middle of this. Nor can we throw a dirt up in the middle in the sky and let it fall where it may and say, okay, we're going to build it there. As I said earlier, it has to be based on something. It has to have some substance to it. And the commitment that we've always maintained is that a clinical site plan analysis of that component of continuum of care would be established. How would a new hospital work with the UCCs? And therefore, where should they be located? That's what I expect to be part of this whole planning process. We have to start from the bottom up. We can't start from the top down. We can't say we're going to build something here and then make it work and then shoehorn everything in after that. We have to start from the bottom up, whereby we have to have that site plan analysis done, the continuum of care established, based on best practices, based on a clinical plan, and then work ourselves up, and then therefore that will drive the agenda of construction, of where they should be located. That's point number one. Point number two, with respect to the covering of that sign. I noticed the same thing today. I happened to have a meeting in the Falls today too, and it was funny because when I was driving down Montrose, I seen the cover go on. I got to my meeting, I turned on my BlackBerry, or looked at my BlackBerry after I parked my car, and noticed a message from Minister Matthews that she was going to do an announcement across the street this afternoon at the AirPad Center in the hall. So both obviously were together. I'm not going to assume what happened after that because I don't know, nor do I. But all I do know is that, let's face it, at the end of the day, it was a political stunt to put the sign up, and it got some attention. But that doesn't dismiss the other site. It does not dismiss the Highway 140. It means, although it was a recommendation by Dr. Smith, it's never been decided on. Besides the city of Niagara Falls erecting a sign, it wasn't erected by the NHS or anybody else. Bottom line is that the city of Niagara Falls found it upon themselves and to erect a sign. Stunt or not, they did it, but it doesn't dismiss the other site location. And once again, I want to go back to my earlier comments, and I'll repeat myself. We expect this process now to drive the location. The clinical site plan must be the substance to driving the capital build for not only the hospital, but the 2 UCCs. Hence my comments earlier. And we've been driving this home for the past 6 months, Dave. I've been saying the same thing for the better part for the last 6 months. You know, no one's ever said nothing about the UCCs. Well, it's time they do. It's time they do. Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like the way you put this. I really do. And I hope that there's going to be some kind of release come out of your office that really drives the point home of who agreed to what when it comes to the Niagara Falls site or 140 and towards Welland anyway. And I'd really like to see that come out of your office, because sometimes I wonder if the people who live in the ivory towers, wherever the hell they are, if they even hear what happens here, you know? They even hear what the words that get spoken from this area. When they talk about a South Niagara hospital, I don't know of anybody who considers Niagara Falls south, except maybe south of Niagara on the Lake. It's not south. It's not in the south. That's the biggest joke going. So to me, you know, if we're going to put some real cards on the table here, like, let's clear up a couple of misconceptions about what mayors agreed to or what they didn't. And you made that pretty clear here, but I'd really like to see something official come out of your office stating that. And when I read that release from the announcement this afternoon, starting out with what I consider to be lies is not a good place to start. I'm not impressed with that announcement. Now, do I want what you're saying to come about? Absolutely. Put a hospital based on facts and the data collected and where it makes sense and all those other things, but they sure as hell didn't do that when they put that hospital up in the St. Catharines. They sure as hell didn't base it on any of that. So my expectation, like that bar of expectation, is way low when it comes to what the powers that be will do or not do. So we need to be like even more vocal than we ever were before. To make sure that this planning process actually does use the data, actually does make some kind of sense. Because let me tell you, Niagara Falls doesn't make sense to me. That's not a South Niagara hospital. I've just about said a bad word, and I won't. But that's just nonsense. Thank you.
Well, I was talking to Alan Bennett today from the Tribune, and I asked him a question. And the question is, and I asked the mayor of Niagara Falls this question, and he wouldn't answer me. I asked him, I said, you know, hypothetically, if Niagara Falls, Welland, Pelham, Foote Area, Port Colborne, and Wainfleet were all one city, the city of Niagara Falls, where would that hospital go? So unfortunately, we're dealing with jurisdictions here. We're dealing with a bit of politics. And of course, we all recognize that in Niagara Falls, that's where the sun goes up and down. So we have to take all that into consideration. But if we're all the city of Niagara Falls, where would that hospital go? Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I applaud you for your comments, and I do hope that you're able to move forward with some of the things you've said tonight, but I've got to agree that I believe this is more a political decision. If our healthcare were determined on needs, it would be a very different picture. It isn't now, and it probably won't be in the future. So it comes down to every person on the street. And I would ask everyone who lives in Fort Erie, Port Colborne, Ridgeway, Wainfleet, all of you, get in your cars, time yourself from your home, go to the site preferred in Niagara Falls, go to the site preferred in Welland, time yourself, see how long it takes you to go there. And then while you're doing that, imagine a loved one sitting next to you suffering a heart attack. Because that's what you're doing. You've got to turn around and understand what it costs you. And then go to the political party you support and let them know your support depends on the decision that serves you best. That's really about the only way to go forward with this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bodner actually asked probably the question of the evening, and that being, you know, where do we go from here? And I want to say this. I do want to caution opinion right now, and the reason for that is because we have, and I'm being very optimistic here. I'm trying to be very optimistic here, and Councillor Bodner, that's what I'm trying to be, and that's why I'm being calm, because I'm hoping that this $26.2 million planning process is just that. Is sincerely a $26.2 million planning process. And my expectation is that the facts will drive the agenda. Now, albeit we all might have opinions on where we think these hospitals and urgent care centers will go, I think if we get involved in this process through the South Niagara Healthcare Corporation, all of us in South Niagara, let the facts drive the agenda. Let the facts, when we do our clinical site plan analysis, let that drive the agenda with respect to the bills. Let's face it, when I go into a healthcare meeting, I don't pretend to be a doctor. I don't pretend to be a medical professional, albeit we've learned a heck of a lot in the last 10 years. It's regardless. At the end of the day, the professionals will be at the table. We expect the professionals to be at the table, the medical professionals who've been working with us for the better part of the last decade, and others. And with that said, we would only expect that a clinical site plan analysis, best practices, and all that will come out of this process, and that will drive the location of the capital builds. So my recommendation to you is game on. Game on. Let's take what we've done and try to inject that into the overall process, as well as take what we're going to have come out of this process and let that drive the overall process. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Elliott, go ahead. I know you got something on your mind. Say it.
A couple of things. And no slight. Growing up in St. Catharines, the new St. Catharines Hospital was never meant to be a regional hospital in the first place. Correct. The new St. Catharines Hospital was only meant to replace the Do in the General. And actually the citizens of St. Catharines and Niagara-on-the-Lake and Thorold, who it services, actually got the short end of the stick because they placed it in an area where it's the most difficult part of St. Catharines to get to. If it was supposed to be a regional hospital like everybody keeps yelling and screaming about, and it was going to be centered in the center of Niagara at Highway 20 and 406, how mad would you be in St. Catharines if you had to drive all the way down to Fawn Hill to get to a hospital after having so many hospitals in St. Catharines? So take that out of the equation. All of a sudden, we threw in the Regional Cancer Center. That's when the discussion about being a regional hospital came to fruition. I'd still rather drive to St. Catharines for cancer treatment than have to drive to Hamilton. And I know we get excited when we talk about how far we're driving for health care. And I know that to drive a loved one to the hospital that's suffering a heart attack, we always say, well, now it's a 20-minute drive or a 25-minute or 30-minute drive. They're not going to make it. Chief, what's the response time for your guys in Port Colborne in ambulance care?
Chief?
Your worship, our average call response time is less than 6 minutes.
Less than 6 minutes.
Which is the best in the region, by the way.
Which, yeah, yes, and kudos to you guys. Second of all, if this ever gets cited in Niagara Falls, now we come back to what the mayor has been hammering on for the last 6 months. Where's the UCCs go? I would rather, if you're going to build the hospital in Niagara Falls, which may or may not be part of South Niagara, we better have a UCC that's pretty darn close to us. That eliminates your travel time to the hospital. So if you've got to get emergency care, there will be a site provided, hopefully, that's a short hop, skip, and a jump away. Better yet, I would recommend to anybody, if anybody's suffering a medical emergency, 911 is the best care right now. We've got advanced care paramedics on ambulances that can administer a variety of drugs and treatments that are going to get you, you know, hopefully safely transported, get you stabilized and transported to a hospital. But I would hate people to try to take a loved one that's suffering and put them in a car and drive them somewhere. Call the professionals. Dial 911. Get the professionals to come and help you out. Let them do their jobs. Let's see what happens. You're right. It's an assessment that's going to happen right now at 26.2. Like Councillor Bodner said, what's next? Let's see how it plays out. It's always been a curiosity of mine. We sit here and we say, Niagara Falls is not in South Niagara. It's not. And yet, when the South Niagara mayors got together to identify sites for a hospital, the mayor of Niagara Falls was invited. Well, if Niagara Falls isn't in South Niagara, why was he originally invited to the first meeting with Dr. Smith to pick out the sites? Next month, there's a Mayors of South Niagara luncheon, and the mayor of Niagara Falls is on the agenda. Well, if Niagara Falls isn't in South Niagara, how come he's coming to lunch? We keep including Niagara Falls in South Niagara, and yet when a decision has been made that doesn't appear to appease South Niagara, we always say, well, Niagara Falls isn't there. But he's always included, they're always included in discussions with South Niagara. So you can't have them in a discussion about something and then turn around and say you're not part of the gang. Somewhere along the line, they're either in or they're out. Right? Kick them out? And that's true. But it's always been this lingering thought in my mind. We're having the Mayors of South Niagara luncheon and the mayor of Niagara Falls comes. So either they are in South Niagara or they're not. He was in, Niagara Falls mayor was in the group that originally picked the sites. And I don't remember anybody at that time standing up and saying, wait a minute, why is the mayor of Niagara Falls here? They're not South Niagara. So right from the get-go, we should have put a shot across the bow and say, wait a minute, we're talking about the South. Niagara Falls, you want to say it's in the middle or it's in the north, that's fine, but he's not part of South Niagara. So those things have always been bothering me. And it's when you cut down to the chase now, we're going to pick a site. Yes, best practice. And how are we going to do it? By all means, pick it that way. Choose the site that way. But let's have a discussion on where the UCCs are going to go. To me, that's almost as important as the site of the hospital. So that's just my spiel for tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Any further comments or questions? So going from here, we're going to bring this to South Niagara Healthcare Court. There are two takeaways. One obviously is the planning process and everything that we've accrued over time to inject that into the process, as well as what we're going to bring forward with respect to the planning. The second part of it is trying to lobby the government to deal with the effects of consolidation of inpatient beds and outpatient clinics, as well as the regional programs. And of course, with that, what we're dealing with today. And the further funding that we require to continue with the primary care programs that we've already not only established, but also enhanced throughout South Niagara, if not all of Niagara. I'd be remiss if I didn't comment on Councillor Elliott's comments, because I think, Dave, you're bang on. You're bang on. And I think that's healthy discussion. I think discussion that we had this evening is very healthy. And to continue this discussion at South Niagara with our partners, because let's face it, park the politics, park the egos, park the jurisdictions, and just look at new funding for a capital builds for a hospital and 2 UCCs in South Niagara, period. The clinical site plan analysis, as well as best practices, will drive those locations. That's what we have to concentrate on together. Never mind if it's in Niagara Falls, or if it's in Welland, or if it's in Port Colborne. What is best for the patients? And that planning process should drive that. And that's what we look forward to. So with that, no further questions. I expect to see you all there at the next South Niagara Healthcare Corporation meeting. Which is? Next Monday. right before the budget meeting. So you guys are coming up for budget at 6 o'clock. We have South Niagara at 5. We'll be there. And Joanne said she's bringing out pizza, so you're good to go. Have I'm sure it's going to be a hot topic, and Councillor Kenny, and I'm sure you're going to be there because you're on the corporation, but as well as, Ron, are you on that corporation as well? Ron, and so is Yvonne. So, but it would be nice to get you all there so we can have that discussion there versus here, and of course come back here with recommendations. So enough of that. No further comments or questions. Let's move on to our regional council's report. Regional Councillor Barrick is not in attendance this evening. Anything regionally, by all means, members of council, you can bring it to my attention, or Councillor Barrick's attention at some other time. But this evening, I'd be more than happy to attend to those regional issues, which I know you're very, very interested in. With none? Come on. Nothing? Okay. We'll move on to Councillor's items, new business. Councillor Demeray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Rosnick was scheduled to be a delegation tonight, and he has decided to withdraw his wish to be a delegation in order for us to sit down and have a discussion with possibly some staff members and discuss his issues, and maybe in the future come back to council, but it may not have to come back.
Okay, great. Thank you. Further new business. Councillor's items. Councillor Steele. And Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Worship. As everyone around this table knows, we had the public open house today with regards to our new ops center. So my question is through you, Your Worship, to Mr. Hansen. With regards to the process, Ron, what are our timelines to get this going as soon as possible? Can you kind of give us an update on that?
Mr. Hansen.
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Steele. Our timeline is we're going to fast track this project, as we discussed at our report late last year, as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, with the process, it is a planning process, and we have to follow all the steps. We've been in several discussions with the Ministry of Environment and the rep, who's our consultant in terms of following the process. We have our meeting tonight, a follow-up meeting, which will illustrate the preferred sites that we've come to with the list. There's a waiting period after each one of these meetings that we have to follow. We're hoping to have, after the third and last meeting with the site selection, probably sometime in May, to file our ESR with the ministry. Following that, as council knows, we are well along in terms of our design for the facility. Depending on the preferred site, we can take that design, place it on the preferred site, and really fast track the next process, which is finalizing the design, going to the tender stage, and we're hoping to be out to tender in the fall of 2014. That's sort of the best case scenario if everything falls into place with the site.
Thank you, Mr. Hansen. Councillor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Ron, for that. So through you to Ron, with regards to the site selection, what is the earliest date it'll come back here for council to make a decision on the site?
Mr. Hansen?
The second meeting, we have to, after the waiting period right now, we have to have our technical advisory committee meeting, and as soon as we have that meeting in March, or it's around the end of February, as soon as we have that meeting, we will come back, schedule the third meeting, and then file the ESR after that. So we're looking at May probably for that process.
Councillor?
Completed.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. So in essence, we really can't make a decision till then, till after the third meeting?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Council can't make that decision until we go through this EA process after the third meeting, and then if council's on board with that preferred site, then as you did in 2013, selected the site, we can then move forward with the tendering. Technically, we probably shouldn't be going too far along with the design until the site is actually selected, but the ministry understands the process that we went through, and no fault of anybody, so that design will proceed with the site selection.
Thank you, Mr. Hansen.
Okay.
Councillor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Hansen. The reason why I bring this up tonight is on the weekend I was with Joe Capabianco, who was the project manager for the Valet Center for Aquacon Construction. And here's a company that just laid off two gentlemen, one 20 years, one 22 years, both supervisors. There is no work. Tenders are coming in at some all-time low prices right now. There was a peak not long ago where a facility very similar to the Valet went out, and the tender came back at $42 million. It was $10 million more than ours, and that was about basically 5 years kind of between when we started going out and when we finally got our tender. That's the timeline. So costs have gone way up when things were busy, busy, busy. They're not. When a company like Aquacon, who we're very familiar with, is laying off 20 and 22-year veteran supervisors because there is no work, this is a pressing issue. I hate to see us get stuck that in the fall, all of a sudden costs skyrocket again. So if we can, whatever ways possible through, obviously we're mandated by the Municipal Act and the Planning Act and all the other stuff to slow this down, to be quite honest. I think red tape from government is brutal. We're getting better at it here in the City Hall, but we're still not 100%. But anyways, better than if you look above us. I just like to see this come in, because then we can look at pricing that is more manageable for this council. Because this decision has to be made. I mean, don't fool ourselves, people. We're under the gun from the Ministry of Labor to get out of our facilities. So, you know, I can't believe that they're not helping us fast track this, especially in good times like this. No, because we've already done this once. I mean, it was unfortunate that part of the site was good, part of the site wasn't. So, you know, it's not like this is new to the public in Port Colborne. I mean, we've done this. All it is a site. So, I mean, you know, whatever ways we can get this done, and as it comes to council, that councilors really know the subject here. You know, we've got Councillor Danch as our liaison to the committee. Let's get moving on this, because let's get the best price possible. I mean, that's what we're here for. So spend less money today, but prices are at some all-time lows on this stuff that are coming out. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any comments on that? Councillor Danch, then Councillor Butters, and Councillor Kenny.
I know been able to sit down with Ron there several times with the people, and I think we've got a structure that we feel will work, and no doubt the red tape slows things down, but I'm pretty sure, and I know Ron is really eager to get some going, because right now, I'll tell you what those people are working in is nothing but a freaking wall. And we have to get them out of there, and personally, if you do go visit, bring an extra pair of shoes, because it's disgusting, and we'll get them out of there. We'll get a building up. We're working hard at it. We know what we have to do, and just give us that chance. We will build something soon.
Thank you, Councillor Danch. Councillor Kenny and Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ron. Ron, why do we have to wait the 5 weeks again? I just don't quite get that. We've already done this once, as you know, Councillor Steele said. So, and that site did not work out. Was not, you know, acceptable, I guess, for the building. So now, because we're choosing a different site, which we still haven't chosen, we have to wait another 5 weeks. I don't understand why the waiting period all the time when, as Councillor Steele said, we're building it, but now we have to keep waiting. So I guess my concern is in 5 weeks when it comes back to us, and in there we get our choices of sites and the preferred site and whatever. Are we going to wait again? Do we have to wait again after we choose a site? I guess that's my big concern.
Here, Mr. Mayor, it's a very good question, Councillor Kenny. Unfortunately, with the EA process, it's legislated, it's mandated. There is a waiting period. After each public meeting, there's a waiting period to garner any comments you get from the public, and also the agencies. We've notified all the agencies that could be impacted by it, the Seaway Authority, everybody that's involved. So they need time. They need their 30-day waiting period to generate their comments through their planning sections and so on. So it's all part of the process. The main reason is that we're considering different sites now. It's not the same sites. If we could simply go back and say it's the same 5 sites or 6 sites, it might be a slightly different scenario. But we've got some new sites that have become available since the 2009 process, and also a couple sites that were considered then are no longer available, like the West Side Arena site, for instance. So it's square one, but as I said to Councillor Steele, it's fast-tracked. We're going to, at the very minimum timelines that we can have following these meetings and the question periods that come after that, we will move quickly on it. And with the design, we're very comfortable in the fact that the design is well on its way with the work we've done. We've visited other sites throughout the province that have similar facilities, so we're very happy with that. We can take this design, we can take this process and put it on the new site and very quickly go to tender with that. And the architects are very anxious to get going on it as well.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the gentlemen that works at the yard brought me in this. And this was a handle from a grader. And when he went to work during that terrible cold snap, I went to open the door of the grader, it broke. And I'm going to pass it around because this thing's not light. It's kind of a heavy thing, and it snapped off. And he brought it and asked me to share that with you because he wanted to kind of bring home the point how the machinery should be, you know, have storage indoors. The wear and tear on the machinery and what happens, computers freezing up on these machines, it's been really, really difficult. So I'm just going to pass the handle around. You can feel how heavy it is. This is what happens to our machinery when it's not, when it's left outside. And we will be, he really wants to see us when we build this thing have indoor storage for the machinery. So I'm just going to pass it around.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Steele. I agree with what everyone else said. Bottom line is, I came in later on during the process this evening, and someone asked me, do you want to put your name down? And like everyone is supposed to do. And I said, no. My bottom line is, we need this. We got to get it done. That's the bottom line. The employees need it. We need it as a city. And once we've done this, essentially, in the city, we should be good for close to 50 years before we really need to build something else. So we will have covered pretty well everything in the city. Bottom line, let's get it done. Let's get it done as quickly as possible, especially if the conditions that Councillor Steele are talking about, let's get it done. And instead of 6 to 8 million, maybe we can get something a little less than that, maybe 5 million instead. Who knows? But we won't know until we put our foot in the water, and right now we're being held back. We're being held back from doing that. And my bottom line is, we need it. Let's get it done. Let's get it over with, and let's move on.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions or comments? Anything else, Ron? You good? Okay, members of council, any further new business? Councillor Elliott.
Real quick, thank you, Mayor. Through you to Mr. Hanson. Pick on Ron Knight. We've had a couple of significant weather events so far. A couple of real bad rainfalls, ground's all frozen. Basements were flooded in our area down the woods. Our church suffered some flooding that's never happened before. It didn't come up through the sump, come in through the wall, so we may have structural issues, but I think it was where the frost line was. A couple of questions came to me about how have the drains been operating, and have we had any equipment problems with regards to the drains, namely over by Lakeside Yacht Club, the old yacht club, and Sandy Surfside, both pumps and stuff like that. I didn't think we've had any problems, but I'm going to bring it to you and ask for your opinion.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Elliott. Just to preface the comments, the storm we had in December, just before Christmas, we had 50 millimeters of rainfall on top of a major snowfall melt. We had a lot of coverage of snow at the time, warm temperatures, and combined with the 50 millimeters, it was the second highest rainfall in the province, that storm that hit Port Colborne. The drains, as we went out and toured everything, and we had all our staff working full-time at the time, the drains were all working very well, actually. The outlets were all functioning very well. There were no major malfunctions in terms of the drains themselves, the gates, everything was working fairly well. It was sort of a perfect storm in terms of the snow melt, the ambient ground conditions we had, and then with that rainfall, probably approaching a 25-year return. And as everybody knows, these drains are designed basically to handle a 2-year return. So you're going to get surcharging, you're going to get some backups of these drains, and it takes a period of time, days sometimes, with an event like that for all the water to release out to the lake. So generally, everything worked fairly well. Spent a week prior to that storm knowing it was coming. The weather reporting is very good nowadays. A week prior to that, ensuring that the gates and everything were working well, freeing up the ends of culverts in Ward 4, any places there might have been some blockage, working ahead of that with crews. So we think everything worked fairly well, It was just a combination of some very bad conditions in terms of the weather. Some of the basement flooding I know that was experienced, we had some power outages, unfortunately, because we had the extremely high winds during that event, which was the third component of that storm. With the power outages, that's always a disaster in terms of the sump pumps not working. We actually had a flooding event here with a malfunction in this building, with a malfunction of the pumps during the power outages. So whether it was surface flooding causing the flooding in some of the homes or just the power outages, we never know. I'm sure we're going to experience quite a number of claims as a result of that event. So we'll work hard and ensure that it doesn't continue on in any aspect of that.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Councillor? That's fine. Just on that, Ron, I do want to give yourself as well as your staff a lot of congratulations. I'm not sure if you got my email over the weekend, but Doug Cressy in particular, who took the time to really check out some of the trouble spots, especially in the Ward 1 area. I know down by the Hampton area and Schofield area, some residents have been experiencing some problems there, and Doug actually took the time to go out there and ensure that he kept an eye on the area to not have what's happened in the past happen again. Some of the residents were sort of on pins and needles and were very uncomfortable, so Doug did take the time to keep an eye on it, and thank you from the residents and myself as well for doing just that, going well beyond the call of duty and taking the time to ensure that those areas were looked after, so thank you. So with that, members of council, are there any other items of new business? Members of staff, any updates? The Chief? Go ahead.
Your Worship and members of council, it's really not an update, but we had an incident occur here about 2 weeks ago on a Saturday in which a resident had some flooding within his apartment, and he called the administration lines after 7 o'clock at night a number of times and left messages. Unfortunately, those lines aren't answered on a Friday night after 7 o'clock. There's a process within the phone system that allows him to get directly to my duty officer on his cell phone. So if that process had been followed through, that individual would have been able to get a hold of the duty officer that was working that particular night. Early the next morning, an email was received from a member of council indicating the address and the issue that had been going on for a number of hours with regards to flooding in an apartment running through a light fixture. I just want to say that if you have a safety issue in your home of any sort that deals with life safety or building safety, call 911. That's what it's there for. We will come, we will determine whether or not if we can resolve it or maybe we can get some help. But that's one of the things that seems to be reoccurring. This is the most recent case that happened. So if you have a safety issue, we need to know about it sooner than later. So call 911, we will come, we will determine what we can do to help relieve the situation. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Well stated. Members of staff, any further updates? Okay, Donnie. Got ya. Mr. Sinez.
Just a reminder of our budget meeting next Monday night. We'll be back at it again here at 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, I believe it is.
Thank you, Peter. And by the way, before the budget meetings, the South Niagara Healthcare Corporation at 5 o'clock. So with pizza. So it'd be great if you guys can show up to the 5, and then of course the 6 budget, where everyone's so excited to take part in. And of course we're going to get it right down, right, Peter? We're there. Is that a message? Yeah. Councillor Butters.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was actually the councillor who emailed in about what the chief was talking about. By the time those people let me know, I wanted to say the fire department acted so quickly and so professionally. That family has 2 little boys. They were so grateful for the firefighters that came over there, secured it, made sure that the hydro was turned off and secured, and they've since moved out of that place, so they're in a much better place. But there's I think 3 or 4 apartments in that building, so I just want to personally thank the chief and his staff. Like, they were wonderful, and that family was extremely grateful for the help that they received from our fire department. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments or questions? Goes back to my earlier comments, guys. Well done. It might seem like a small thing to you guys, but it's such a big thing to the residents when you give them that comfort level. So great job to all you guys during those tough times for the residents. So with no further new business, members, we'll now move on to adoption of the minutes. I do have a set of minutes here of the 27th meeting, regular of Committee of the Whole, dated December 9th, 2013. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Elliott, Councillor Doucette. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. Now moving on to items requiring a separate discussion. We're going to start off with item 1. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Department of Engineering and Operations Division Report number 2014-01, subject Burt Miller Nature Club Lake Erie Coast Project, that the council grant permission to the Burt Miller Nature Club to complete beach grass planting events and erect signage and rolling boardwalks at Centennial Beach and at other city-owned shoreline properties that staff deem as being appropriate. That council directs staff to liaison with Burt Miller Nature Club in order to finalize the location and dates of all activities, and that the council directs staff to keep council apprised of any other city-owned shoreline properties where Burt Miller Nature Club will be undertaking their Lake Erie Coast project activities. And I believe an Albert Garfalo of this Burt Miller Nature Club is in attendance and would like to speak to this.
Thank you, Councillor. Have a seconder to that, please. Councillor Danch. Mr. Garofalo, welcome. Great to see you again. Watch your head. Just want to press the gray button there and you're live.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. I'm Albert Garofalo with the Burt Miller Nature Club. And the Burt Miller Nature Club is a not-for-profit corporation holding charitable status with the Canada Revenue Agency. And our role, a little bit of background, our role is to restore and protect the natural environment and to foster an understanding and awareness of natural resources and how it improves the quality of life in Niagara. So as you're aware, the Burt Miller Nature Club submitted a successful application to the Great Lakes Guardian Community Fund. And the Ministry of the Environment administers this fund to support its ongoing commitment to the protection and restoration of the ecological health of the Great Lakes Basin and the St. Lawrence River Basin. And the purpose of our project, what I want to talk about today, is simply to restore and enhance natural beach topography and sand dune ecosystems along the Lake Erie coast here in Niagara in partnership with the City of Port Colborne, local cottage associations, and local high school students. So the objectives of our project we have three main objectives. One is to plant beach grass to restore beach and sand dune topography at 5 public beaches. The second objective is to build and create and install 3 boardwalks at high-use public access areas to keep foot traffic off of the fragile dune environments and the sensitive sands. And the third objective is to install some interpretive signage to let people know what we're doing about a little bit about the project and to educate them about the unique coastal species that exist along the shoreline. And those 2 will be placed at high-profile beach access areas. So essentially the project intends to mobilize the local community to restore our corner of the Great Lakes Basin. So I included this slide here. I just have a few slides that I'll go through. I included this slide. It's an advertisement from the state of Michigan, just to highlight first the natural beauty of the Great Lakes coast. I'm sure most people are aware, but also just about the economic potential of the tourism of the Great Lakes coast. Due to their aesthetic and recreational appeal, the Great Lakes coast attracts significant tourism, and it's a major driver of cottage communities in their larger municipalities. Nature tourism is a growing sector of the tourism market, and Blue Flag Beach designations is another main driver of the tourism market. And so these are all important opportunities, I think, for the community. And but despite these values, human activity over the past 2 centuries has degraded some of our sand dunes. Some of the sand dunes are highly eroded. Other sand dunes where the shorelines are quite hardened and separated from the wave action are actually non-existent. So overall in Ontario, sand dunes are very rare. There's much less than 1% of the Ontario land base is sand dunes. So every little bit is important. There's not much of it, and we intend to help to try to restore some of this. In the larger Great Lakes Basin, the Great Lakes shoreline encompasses about 10,000 kilometers or 10,000 miles of shoreline, and it's the largest system of freshwater dunes in the world. Some of the best freshwater dunes can be seen right here on Lake Erie and occur in the Niagara region. Some of the highest dunes in this area are just down the road at Sugarloaf Hill, and exceeding 100 feet at times. So we have significant dunes here, and interestingly enough, the highest dunes in all of the Northeast, outside of Cape Cod, occur again on the Great Lakes, just in New York State on Lake Erie. So although they're freshwater dunes, they're very similar to the ocean dunes, and we have some great examples of them here. So I just want to talk quickly about dunes, the difference between the beach and the dune when I talk about that. Dunes are formed when waves of a large lake or ocean push sand ashore, obviously, and then the wind acts upon that sand, depositing it above the wave line or the high water mark. So any beach grass that we're talking about planting will definitely be above the beach zone or the high water mark or the wave mark. And typically the beach grass starts at the toe of the dune slope. You can see where the sand is building and starting to grow. Beach grass is really important on sand dunes because it's a very rigid grass, and it acts like a snow fence. When sand-laden winds blow inland, they hit the beach grass, and they act like a snow fence, slowing the wind down and depositing that sand. And then further, the beach grass grows above this accumulation of sand, capturing and holding that sand in place. So beach grass is important to hold and stabilize dunes. Without beach grass, sand dunes wouldn't exist. They'd just be blowing and moving like parabolic dunes or shifting dunes with blowouts. Another important thing about dunes, dynamic dunes are really important because they act as a reservoir. They hold sand in years where there's good accumulation of sand and there's not severe storms. Those dunes will continue to grow, hold sand as a reserve. But in years where there's high scour or big storms and the beach gets eroded, those sand dunes will then erode back and replenish the beach, and it's a give and take. It's a constant give and take, and that's why it's important to have that connection without a hardened shoreline, because when the hardened shoreline is there, that process doesn't happen. So beach grass, this is beach grass here. It's that typical grass that you might think of when you think of Cape Cod, with the two chairs looking out on the ocean and the beach silhouette in the foreground with the broken snow fence on the access to the beach. It grows strictly on the Atlantic coast from North Carolina all the way up to Newfoundland, but it is found also on the Great Lakes. So originally, just after the last glaciation, the Champlain Sea connected the Atlantic Ocean to the Great Lakes Basin at that time, and that's when the beach grass moved into the Great Lakes Basin. But since the glaciers retreated, the waters went down, the land rebounded, beach grass has been stuck here ever since. So in Ontario, it's highly confined to just the shoreline. Otherwise, you'd have to go to the Atlantic coast to see it. It does also grow on Lake Champlain in the States and one lake in Quebec, but very restricted to either the Great Lakes coast or the Atlantic Ocean. So it's unique grass. The grass here on the Great Lakes is slightly different from the grass on the ocean, and that's why we're proposing to plant locally harvested beach grass, because the ocean beach grass is a little bit more aggressive. So we'll ensure to use local beach grass. And in the Niagara area, this is a great example of dune restoration. We call this Sue's Dunes. This is in Fort Erie. A local landowner there saw that her beach was continually being eroded by storms, and as well it was heavily raked, and that further reduced the elevation of the sand, and the beach topography went down. The beach became wetter, wetland species came in, it became undesirable. So she had a policy where she didn't let people rake up close to her dune, and she found that by letting the beach grass grow, she was getting about 3 feet of sand dune growth a year. You can see the sand just piling up in front of the dune, and then the grass would quickly grow, capture, and hold that. That happened the next year, the same thing. She got another 3 feet. Third year, she got another 3 feet. So she had dunes 6 to 9 feet growing with nicely covered grasses. But as I said, it's a give and take relationship. Not this winter. Last winter, there was a severe storm before the ice covered the lake, and that storm eroded quite a bit of her dunes. But she noticed that it just simply replenished that sand, replaced the beach, and she had a nice, dry, gently grading beach. And in other areas, there was severe damage from that storm, and the beach was eroded even further. So it's quite important to the health of the beach. Where you rake, where you have hardened shore walls, you end up with a situation like this. Not much can grow, and the beach, the shoreline is disconnected from the dunes, so the dunes then are just a pile of sand with grass or weeds growing on it. I think I skipped one, but oh no, actually I went the wrong way there. Here we are. So again, where in these places, there's very little to no vegetation, and that encourages blowing sand. That's a road allowance there, Crescent Beach Road Allowance in Fort Erie. And the sand was blowing, migrating. There's erosion on some of the structures there. So as a pilot project, we worked on doing some restoration at this site there. Where beaches, I should also point out the correlation, where sand dunes are healthy and the vegetation is intact, there's also usually a direct correlation to the property values of healthy intact dunes versus areas where they're not as healthy. So to that end, we worked with the Crescent Beach Improvement Association on a pilot project to plant some beach grass to see how it grows, what the best way to do it is. We did this in early April. We invited volunteers out. A number of people came out. It was early April. It was a nice day. It was near Earth Day. It's a lot easier than planting trees, putting beach grass in. So we did that as an activity. That's Councillor Bob Suckley from Fort Erie who came out and helped us. And just in a few hours, we planted. What we did was we had donor beach grass from the area where I showed you before, where the dunes were growing and blew out. We divided that up, put in beach grass about every foot spacing, and it's been growing and doing quite well since then. We also put a sign up just to let people know what we were doing, and we've got a little bit of accumulation of sand growing. So that was our first attempt at it. We also did another event. We actually came to council hoping to do it on the Pleasant Beach Road Allowance. In the end, because of the window of opportunity of planting the grass when it's dormant, we couldn't get our insurance in place before that. So we did it on the adjacent Shirks and Shores property. It was a family event. A lot of people came out. We had a meal on the beach, and we had a great morning. And again, planted a lot of beach grass in an area that was blown out on the Shirks and Shores property. And you can see all the beach grass that we planted off in the horizon there. And that's been growing and expanding ever since. So that's been quite successful as well. This past fall, we did another experiment and planted in the fall versus the spring. So we've been trying to see what works best and learning as we go. We put up a sign. Originally, as I said, we were hoping it was going to be a project with Port Colborne, but this is another sign on the road allowance. This is where we intended to put it. So most people are familiar with the Pleasant Beach Road Allowance. That's an example of a road allowance where I think a project like this would fit quite nicely. As it is, the blowing sand is moving in and migrating in onto the road. So the goal is to put boardwalks in place. This would channelize this would contain beachgoers to the boardwalk. It would provide people with reduced mobility an opportunity to visit the beach. It's a heck of a lot easier than slogging through the sand with your chairs and all your gear. So it doesn't make sense to not walk off the boardwalk if you have that opportunity. Humans usually follow the path of least resistance. So the goal is to put boardwalks in a situation like this. That would then keep people off of the dunes, and we could then plant beach grass to try to hold and stabilize these dunes and reduce the blowing and migration of the sand. We could also put signs there to let people know about the unique species there and dunes and the project itself. Another ideal location would be the Wildwood Beach Road Allowance. You can see there's 66 feet wide, these road allowances, and often quite long. And again, when I mentioned that just 1% of sand dunes in Ontario, it's quite a unique and specialized habitat, and we have some good examples of that. And you can see the stark contrast between where beach grass is allowed to grow and the natural vegetation can hold and stabilize the dunes versus where people don't have a set place to walk and access the beach. Usually people just go in rows of 5 wide to the beach and trample everything in the way. So this is another ideal situation. Another view of the same contrast. And this is an example of the boardwalk that we intend to utilize. This is at Pinery Provincial Park, and the boardwalks they use there, they found that when you invest the time and money of putting in large elevated boardwalks with steps and piers, they often fill in and they actually slow the sand down and create a mound of sand there. The stairs get covered and require a lot of labor to keep them opened. So they found that they put these rolling boardwalks in. They actually roll up because they're attached by steel cable, and they can be pulled in the winter, in November when most of the sand blows in and moves, and then they can be reinstalled in the spring, and that maintains the natural topography of the sand dune environment. Once they're set in place and sand swept in between the gaps of the wood, they're locked in like paving stones. They're very stable, and it's a very nice way to walk. And like I said, humans usually pick the path of least resistance, and it's much easier walking on this than slogging through open sand. This is a picture of Pinery, what they've been doing at Pinery Provincial Park. They actually have volunteer days where the public comes out and helps build the boardwalks, and they've been building a number of them. And what we're proposing is to involve the local high school students. So I've worked with Mark Teal and Mr. Nuccitelli and the other staff at Lakeshore High, and the students are keen to build these boardwalks themselves and have buy into the project and hopefully help install them and learn about the sand dune ecosystems and get an experience to build them as well. So we're excited about that aspect of the project. And as well, I just want to quickly talk about some of the signs. We intend to put some signs, and this is just an example of a few signs, interpretive signs with a coastal theme. And these can also help explain what we've been doing and about the unique habitats we have here. And this, again, is just an example of how this is a local landowner who has put a homemade sign up of her own, and she's estimated she's had thousands of people come by. She's on a busy section of beach, and she has people regularly coming by, fascinated with what she's doing, how the sand dunes have naturalized there, and the beauty of it, and the species that are growing there. So she's able to educate people, and she's a perfect example of where interpretive signage can make a big impact here. So I just wanted to give a brief overview, and if there's any questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Albert. Members of council, Councillor Butters, Councillor Bodner. Someone stand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter. That picture right there, that's on private property. Right? Now, if somebody wants to do that, what's their obligation? Like if somebody was then to buy that piece of property and decided they didn't like that grass, is there a hold on that property? Can they do whatever they want, or is there some kind of a...
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodner, it's my understanding that the beach people are free to groom and maintain their properties as they feel. If the beach was off their property, that would be different. But if that is their property, depending on how they want to maintain their property, would be up to them. So it's different from landowner to landowner. As you walk along the beach, you can see some people maintain it one way and some people maintain it another way. So by putting a sign up, that would not impact any future landowners on how they maintain their property.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that's important because that may be a buy-in from owners to do that, knowing that if they were to sell and somebody didn't like that, there was an option where they weren't locked in with it. One other thing, I'm glad to hear you acknowledge the fact that something you may want to do or going to do at Centennial could disappear in a big storm. That's rather close to the water, and I think some of us that have been around long enough have seen that come and go different times throughout the years, right? So you're willing to live with that. That's good. Road allowances. When you look at a road allowance, are you looking to plant grass just on the side of road allowances, or are you looking to do the road allowance?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. The beach grass typically would be planted in specific areas, so we would be able to control where it's most desirable and where to start it, but eventually it would grow where there is suitable habitat. So typically the beach grass doesn't grow. The benefit of using this local beach grass versus the ocean beach grass, that's quite an aggressive beach grass, and it can really take over a site. In fact, the Nature Conservancy in the state spent a lot of money putting the ocean beach grass on freshwater dunes, and now they have to go and revisit that decision. So the beach grass typically just grows in places it won't often completely cover or carpet the dune. So it will be very patchy the way it grows, and it's hard to say where it will grow, where it won't grow. But it typically is very patchy and grows most aggressively where the sand dunes are growing or building on the active face of the dune. On the back side of the dune, it doesn't do as well.
Sure, and the reason I ask that is that a lot of the road allowances, if not all the road allowances, have a type of gate or something that we lock, but it's important that the emergency services can get down those road allowances in case of a drowning or something like that. So we wouldn't be quite anxious. That's a good example right there. We wouldn't be quite anxious to have dunes that would somehow impede their process. I can see along the edges absolutely holding whatever, but in the grand scheme of things, it wouldn't be a good idea to try to block that allowance with sand, let's say. Yeah. And the other thing is that I believe Cedar Bay Road allowance is talked about in here as a possible one too. That is still used as a boat launch, even though the city doesn't maintain it. If you want to drive down there the opening day of bass season, there'd be a lot of trailers and cars blocking the road down there. They launch the boat. So when you come to do something like that, you might want to take that into account, that there could be tractors turning and stuff like that to get down there. So just something to put in your thought process.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Butters.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My husband and I were lucky enough to actually be down in the North Carolina Outer Banks area, and they have walkways, dunes on either side, and the walkway takes you up and down to the ocean, and so it protects the dunes and allows that what's supposed to happen. And there's nothing more beautiful than to be able to go down on the beach and to walk down on those dunes. So with noting that what Councillor Bodner has said for boat launches and what have you, though, I think that these rolling boardwalks are going to be actually better than what North Carolina had, because they were the raised boardwalks, and the one day there was guys down below having to shovel out the stairway that takes you down, because exactly how you described it was that sand comes up and tends to block it off. So I think it's just going to be a really good thing, and people working together on it to do it where it makes sense, and is going to just make for a healthier beachfront. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions or comments, members? With none, we do have a motion moved and seconded. Albert, anything else you want to add?
No, thank you.
Perfect, great job.
Thank you very much.
Job. Members of council, all those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to item, I believe, 29. Councillor Kenny felt energetic tonight. And she wants to raise item number 29. Councillor Kenny, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. That the correspondence from Frank Fernandez, member of the Stop the Great Lakes Nuclear Dump, Ontario Power Generation plans to build a nuclear waste repository to bury radioactive nuclear waste beside the Great Lakes be received, and that the Port Coban City Council hereby requests comments from the Ministry of Environment in respect of water source protection impacts concerning this matter, and that the above referenced correspondence be referred to the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative for information and comment.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder to that recommendation, please? Councillor Bodner. Councillor Kenny, the floor is yours.
I just said when I read this, holy moly. Just dump and bury radioactive nuclear waste beside the Great Lakes. And that's okay. I was not impressed at all. I think we need to be even more aggressive than this says. Your Worship, I think we need to definitely send a letter off to our MP, Malcolm Allen, for some input on this. I believe this is under federal regulations rather than just the Ministry of Environment for the province of Ontario. And especially, Your Worship, I know you're on that committee for the Great Lakes with other mayors, and I think that we need to really, really address this before they just start doing it and think it's okay. It's, the body of the letter from the gentleman that wrote this, and I believe Councillor Butters will speak to the issue as well because she had a chance to speak to him. It says right here, we need to ask the City of Port Colborne to formally express its opposition to the OPG's plan and speak out for the protection of our Great Lakes. And I just think that's a very important issue, and it's the reason I pulled the report, so it just doesn't get received and filed, and I think we need to get comments. I know I'm going to bring this up to the Environmental Committee as well, as I chair that committee. Councillor Doucette and Councillor Butters are on that committee with me, and I know we're going to be looking into this, but it needs to have a strong voice from your office, from our MP's office, and certainly from environmental protection look at it. We need to be really, really responsive to this, because I certainly don't know if people even know about it. And it just says, Mayor Battery, we sincerely hope that you and your fellow councillors will consider passing a resolution against this nuclear waste repository approximately only 1 kilometer from the shore of Lake Huron. And I just think we need to get a lot of information on this, and when we get that information, certainly act on it. Thank you.
So, Councillor, just you have a resolution on the floor that requests comments from the Ministry of Environment, as well as comments from the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence
Correct.
Cities Initiative. Now, I can say that the St. Lawrence and Cities Initiative, which consists, as you know, of all the mayors in the Great Lakes, has taken some stand in this already.
Okay.
And I can pass some of that information on to you.
Great.
But what I'm hearing and what I'm reading from you is that you want to take it a step further.
Oh, yeah.
And by the way, I agree. I think we shouldn't just receive it. We should actually take it a step further and
Certainly.
supporting this individual and not supporting the dumping of this waste and burying of this waste along Lake Huron.
Yes.
So what I'm asking for, Councillor, is some direction from members of council, you in particular, as you raised it, with respect to where you want to take this.
I know Councillor Butters wants to speak to it as well, because she actually spoke to the writer of this letter. But I just think that we need to send this off to our MP, but we need to send this off to the Premier of Ontario. We need to send it off to our Stephen Hart. We need to take action, like really, really strong action, as a city that will be, well, we get our water from the Great Lakes, right? Goes down the Welland Canal. I was just appalled, I guess, when I read about this. I thought, it's okay. They think it's okay. Like, no.
Okay, that's fine, Councillor. That's fine. Darlene, just to give you some thought process here, I'm going to be looking to you in a second with respect to one of the things that I want to caution council on is let's not step into the water until we know what's in the water.
That's why we need to.
So let's get some information on this, and I'm looking at you, Darlene, because it is somewhat of a source water protection issue, especially where this guy's coming from and the correspondence he sent to us. So what we may want to do is, and I'm going to throw this out there before I go to Councillor Butters, what we may want to do is task staff with getting some information on this. Let's bring it back to council and then pass a resolution. I caution council on only having some of the information and moving forward with it. Let's get all the information. And then, of course, from there, and I would only assume, Councillor, that when you receive that information, you're going to have some direction to attach to it. Okay? Councillor Butters?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I spoke to Mr. Fernandez, he did talk to me about the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence cities and how they'd taken a stand against this and had gone to the hearings and put that position forward. This resolution has been passed by a lot of other communities, so we certainly aren't the first. I do agree with you that we should do some of our own research. That's why I'd like this be referred to the Environmental Advisory Committee and work with Darlene. We talked also about the MPCA because source water protection falls under them as well. So somehow, tap into that resource. So I think that from what Mr. Fernandez told me, there will be a determination made by around April this year. So there is a little bit of time to certainly do all those things, but it's not something that we can sit on our duff with. So I agree with you, do our own research, make sure that we track down the facts I think that the guy I talked to is certainly this is what he's been doing, and he's quite committed and passionate about it. When I asked him what was in it for those municipalities that are willing to accept this nuclear waste, he told me about $21 million. So, there's a lot of money attached to this project. So, yeah, $21 million to be shared amongst 4 or 5 municipalities up that way. So, pretty interesting stuff. And if that's all true, they're not really caring about what's could happen downstream, and we're downstream with a lot of other people. So I would certainly like to see this referred not only to the Ministry of Environment, but to the other ones that I mentioned, our own Environment Committee, work with Darlene, MPCA, MPPs, the whole shebang, to get information and get ready a resolution of our own, if that's what we see fit to do.
So if I can have a member, since you spoke on that, if I can, at length, if I can have a member refer that back to the Environmental Committee with I'm assuming some direction. So I have Councillor Doucette is going to refer that back to the Environmental Committee to work with staff and to come back with information relative to two things. One is the challenges attached to that. But secondly, we don't want to reinvent the wheel either. I'm sure, and I can recall from the meetings that I've attended with the Great Lakes mayors, that there's many resolutions that have come not only from the Great Lakes Mayors Initiative, but also the different municipalities on both sides of the border. Not just on our side of the border, but on both sides of the border. So with that, and then of course crafting our own resolution based on the facts, that would be appropriate to bring back to council. And then of course with that, council direction. That sound good? Okay. All those in favor of referral? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay. So with that, Councillor Kenny, you're fine?
I'm fine with that, yes.
Okay, good. So now we will now move on to any notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion this evening? Frank, you're pretty quiet tonight. It's coming?
It's election year. We can tell.
He hasn't said a word.
So that was priceless. That was priceless. Members of council, no notices of motion. We'll now move on to an adjournment motion for this portion of tonight's agenda. Councillor Steele, Councillor Doucette, any questions or comments? With none, all those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Thank you, members. We'll now move on to our council agenda. Members of council, I am going to ask the clerk to introduce any addendum items she may have. Ashley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. None this evening.
Thank you. If I can have a motion to confirm the agenda, please. Councillor Elliott, Councillor Danch, all those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures of interest this evening? With none, I do have two sets of minutes that, if you don't mind, I'll do in block, unless you want them separated. The first set of minutes of the 45th meeting regular of council dated December 9th, 2013. And a second set of minutes dated December 16th, 2013. That would be the 46th meeting special of council. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Steele, Councillor Bodner, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Are there any items requiring a separate discussion this evening? The items that are listed on your agenda, if I can have a mover and seconder, please. Councillor Danch, Councillor Desmarais, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. I do have a set of minutes of boards, committees, and commissions. Minutes of the Seniors Advisory Council meeting of September 26th, 2013. Same group, dated October 17th, 2013. And once again, the same group, dated November 21st, 2013. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Butters, Councillor Desmarais, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion? Madam Clerk, you're up for the bylaws.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That the following bylaws be read 3 times and finally passed. Bylaw 60350114 being a bylaw to authorize entering into an encroachment agreement with 1729687 Ontario Limited operating as the Bargain Shop, 38 Clarence Street. Bylaw 60360214 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 89-2000, a bylaw regulating traffic and parking on city roads on Mitchell Street. Bylaw 60370314 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 5875-12912 being a bylaw to authorize entering into gifting agreements for the sponsorship of the skateboard BMX park located at Lockgate Park. Bylaw 60380414 being a bylaw to repeal bylaw 2500-11690 being a bylaw to authorize entering into a servicing agreement with Dominic Malone regarding installation of services and construction of a roadway on Franklin Avenue between Woodside Drive and Highway 58, and finally bylaw 60390514, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 5528-12510, being a bylaw to prohibit or regulate the removal of topsoil, the placing or dumping of fill, and the alteration of the grade of land within the city of Port Colborne.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Steele. Councillor Bodnar. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. You seem pretty excited there, Councillor Desmarais. You're freezing. Madam Clerk, confirmatory bylaw, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that the following bylaw be read 3 times and finally passed. Bylaw 6040-0614, being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne at its regular meeting of January 13, 2014.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Kenny. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. Before I go to a motion to go into closed session, I do want to announce our future meetings. On January 20th, beginning at 5 p.m., we will have a South Niagara Healthcare Corporation meeting here in City Hall in Committee Room 3. Following that at 6 o'clock, it is 6, right? Yeah. Peter? 6 o'clock, we will have a budget meeting here in the chamber, once again beginning at 6. No, get a snowmobile. On the 27th, which is a Monday, we will be meeting here once again, Committee of the Whole and Council, beginning at 6:30 p.m. here in the chamber. And following that, our 2 February meetings are the 10th and the 24th, both Committee of the Whole and Council beginning at 6:30 p.m. here in the chamber. So I will be looking for a motion to go into closed session to proceed in camera to deal with 2 items. One, the minutes of the closed session portion of the December 9th, 2013 regular council meeting. And secondly, a confidential verbal report from the CAO concerning a human resources matter pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsection 2392B, personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and 2392D, labor relations or employee negotiations. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Danch, Councillor Bodnar. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Have a wonderful week.